And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have a returning good brother to the temple. Previously here for Dawn, now here for Dollhouse. Wonder if the next game will start with D as well.
Very likely.
The one and only the man called Joel. How you doing tonight, man?
I'm having a good time, generally. It's been a week since we launched the Kickstarter, and things are going pretty well for me.
Yeah. The goal was 5,000 Canadian. It is currently at 6.8 thousand at the time we're recording this.
About 130%.
Mm-hmm. With a little over a month to go. So I know that with this one, this was a collab between you and Black Ivy, but I suppose the question of the chicken and egg comes up with this. How did this who initially approached the idea? How did the idea of doing Dollhouse come to be?
It was initially something that I prompted to her. It was, I think, we were both posting around the same time on PilotNet about working on new projects. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to find a way to get like a very long-standing sort of idea for a pet project actually like down pack and functional, being like a kind of gacha formatted game. Mm-hmm. And I saw her doing some posting about some other like sort of kind of related project ideas, and I just sprung the question of if we should try working on something together, and it worked out.
Oh yeah. Now, with Dollhouse's particular visual style, I believe this is leading into a kind of alternate universe 1960s.
It ranges. I think on average, it's probably like closer to 80s, maybe 70s, in the like present day. But like the alternate future stuff starts diverging around like 60s or 50s, I guess. But like present day in the game is closer to 80s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that. I especially got that vibe because of some of the visuals present. The more grayscale kind of approach. When I was going through it, I kept getting the words Art Deco stuck in the back of my head, and I see the influence map that you had sent, and one of the entries there is Deadlock, so clearly I wasn't too far off.
Yeah, exactly. It's very much an inspiration, especially with some of the historical art that may or may not be placeholder there, depending on how I feel by the time we're finishing the Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm. but I suppose before we went live, I was talking a bit on film noir, and I could see a bit. I could see a bit of that, especially the types of film noir where you have people who are are trying to do the best they can in really, really bad situations, or situations where they know they're kind of screwed.
Yeah, it's there definitely is that film noir inspiration,
Hmm.
both with like the film noir is also typically like a sort of not really clandestine, but a private group or person
Hmm.
getting themselves sort of like knee deep in the mud, like on the street, like seeing what's going on. Uh, and sort of shares that idea of you being this sort of separate group who's getting into some really shady stuff.
Hmm.
As along with the sort of post-war stuff that comes with film noir
Oh yeah,
is also present here. It's not like World War One stuff like noir would be originally. I think it's closer to like I'm not sure. There's not really a real world analog, but since it is happening around the like 80s, it is a bit further in the future. I guess like a neo noir in that sense.
yeah. And one of the other big things that's a key part of cyberpunk as well as noir is keeping
Mhm.
things focused on one particular location. And I think in this case, you have this one city, Ash, where everything is taking place. This is where all the all the world kind of turns. You know, it is the primary place where dolls are manufactured, and is kind of that same melting pot of place that you'd see New York be used in some stories, or since you brought up cyberpunk in the
Mhm.
influence map, Night City is definitely that.
Yes, Ash is definitely a like Night City type location. It's more like real world geography. It is pushed way more on the West Coast than I think Night City is like a New York analog. So I think it's also East Coast, and obviously like the
Night City
New
is
York and
a
Devlog.
Bay Area analog.
Oh, really? Okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay. Well then, yeah, yeah. Ash is the sort of like West Coast super city
Hmm.
of the setting.
Yeah. Yeah. Night City is more or less set in the Bay Area, um, and with various particular neighbors, much in the same way that Shadowrun is set in its version of Seattle.
Hmm.
Although it's funny that you probably knew about this, but Pondsmith had used SimCity to map out Night City originally.
That's amazing. I did not know that. That's that's maybe my favorite thing to hear about Cyberpunk. That's
That
hilarious. Yeah, that's
and
great. That's great.
he has on multiple occasions likened Night City in the various areas to be akin to a theme park,
Mm,
which in a roundabout way does make sense. You know, the different areas that are controlled by different factions and the like. Oh, I'd also be remiss if I didn't bring up the film The Warriors,
mhm.
which has been used as kind of a patient zero for that whole um, gimmick gang idea. Everybody in one particular gang is one specific gimmick.
Yeah.
Uh, but and there is there is a bit of that when it comes to the different sects within the city of Ash. Uh, each one, you know, central and the four cardinal directions. But would it be too much of a stretch to say that there's a bit of DNA of say the mythology of the Continental Hotel it from the John Wick movies within Dollhouse?
Ooh. I mean, a little bit, yeah. I think like John Wick is definitely in that space of in the inspiration chart. I had two sort of two of the sides are the sort of moody inspirations and the thrilling inspirations,
Hmm.
and everything that sort of floats in the thrilling area. I think like if I was gonna put more points on there, John Wick might be in there a little bit. Is very often the sort of like high action like spy thriller and like martial arts thriller
Hmm.
things. Uh, I won't even call them thriller, but
Yeah.
just like sort of very like violent action films. And John Wick is definitely in that space too of like this time very much clandestine organization filled with the sort of the best of the best kind of like freaks in their field,
Hmm.
all working towards their own goals is very much like Dollhouse in its nature. Um and that idea of sort of this area being a place where all of that brews is kind of I think analogous to uh that idea in John Wick.
Hmm. Yeah. And you can kind of see it in some aspects of World of Darkness or the like, where you have this group that is hidden in plain sight, that despite the amount of power that they can bring to bear, they have very specific rules that they must follow, and not following those rules leads to an early retirement, quote unquote.
Hmm.
Uh, and if, which of and by retirement I mean getting shot in the head.
Of course,
Um,
classically.
and in that Now, when it comes to the nature of this game, the fact that the PCs are handlers for an assortment of dolls, these homunculi that they are charged with assigning tasks for. One of the early questions that could come up is how one manages to make it work where you have multiple handlers with multiple dolls in a way that doesn't get overwhelming.
The main thing is I'm making a very active effort. This is less so stated in the text and more so implied by like play and the rules. So this is something that I think most people won't be seeing until they like really get into it, maybe till like playtests start happening on my server or something. But a lot of the goal with Dollhouse and figuring out how to like make a game that plays well around having multiple characters active per player is to leverage as much as I can the disconnect people are already used to by playing TTRPGs. To me, there's a sense of like every game in different ways will sort of make it obvious that you, the player, are not your character.
Hmm.
Even if you go like to the most extreme level of like games that try to connect you to that, like LARPs and stuff,
Hmm.
there is like things that are abstracted and things that you have to sort of like um let the game sort of ignore or sort of force you to imagine rather than things that are actually happening. And I think like some games push it more and more and more to the
Hmm.
point where you don't really have control of your character and you are sort of creating a base for that character to almost express themselves in like an expressionist games sense, as I think J Dragon put it. And this game is sort of going as far as it even can to present that also in the narrative, where a lot of the game's rules are going to have dolls sort of act due to the rules of the game in a similar way that like your player character would, even if you were
Hmm.
not actually playing them. That sort of directs them for you and makes it so players don't need to make a lot of choice individually for both their handler, like their player character, and their doll, which is a sort of player surrogate individually,
Hmm.
which is allowed for since the setting is so strict on what can happen in the game. The game can sort of like force a lot of rulings and force a lot of things onto like tables and roles and descriptions that the game provides, taking that pressure off of the players and the GM.
Oh yeah. And what instantly came to mind is how there was one game that took that whole disconnect you're saying and went a comedic extreme with. Have you ever heard of a game called Everyone is John?
I have, yes.
For those listening who are less familiar, the central idea with Everyone is John is the GM is John. The players are voices in John's head trying to get him to do things. Shenanigans ensue. And
Ooh.
I think the only game I can think of in the last few years that didn't try to have that separation is the Apocalypse series, not powered by the Apocalypse, but the Apocalypse series, the End of the World games that FFG published years ago. Where there was kind of an inbuilt assumption you were supposed to be playing yourself in these end of the world situations.
Yeah, that's like sort of an extreme on the other end of like trying to immerse you like sort of as much as possible at any means necessary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and obviously you can kind of do that in that kind of situation because, you know, it's the end of the world as we know it, and I don't feel fine. But was because of the since we're dealing with gacha and we're dealing with games that have these massive rosters, was doing it in a playing card deck approach that you did, was that a means to make sure that things didn't get too sprawling?
It sort of serves two purposes here. It's a yes, it gave me like a sort of defined limit on how many sort of characters that could be included. Which prevented scope creep, which I think is pretty natural for me, as well as just letting me play with cards in my design, which is something I don't really get an opportunity to do a lot of the time because it's hard to justify it. But I think in this setting, I was allowed to very easily justify for myself reasons to include a deck of cards in the game, which is having the characters represented on the cards is just very nice. It's very fun and lets me do a lot of interesting things with the development of the game that I would not be able to do with dice at all.
Oh yeah. And with that kind of thing in mind, I believe when it comes to die rollings, you're using a D10 pool.
Yes, it's D10s and cards. Yeah.
Which I've mentioned this plenty of times in plenty of other areas. I do firmly believe that that playing cards in general are an underutilized means of resolution or means of mechanics within TTRPGs.
Fully agreed. There's so much they can do, and they're like not that hard to get a hold of. I think it's one of the best ones. It's one of the best ones you can use.
Yeah, everybody has a deck of playing cards around somewhere. And if not, you can.
And if they don't, it's not any harder to get than D6 sets.
Like, I'd say it's easy. You can get them in gas stations.
Exactly. You can't get a fucking D20 in a gas station. Let me tell you.
That'd be one hell of a sight to see if that happened. But when it comes to the concept of creating handlers, and specifically the styles, would it be fair to say that these styles are not necessarily a class, but more of a broad archetype, an answer of how you handle things?
Yes. It's like they're very similar to I think a lot of Power by the Top Apocalypse playbooks,
Hmm.
where they're like it's a class, but it is very meta in a sense that a lot of classes aren't in some other games. Like
Hmm.
I think D&D classes almost kind of exist within the setting. Like you probably say that in some games you could say the name of the class and it would mean something, but the abilities and effects on the styles here are so meta. I think they're much more like just for the players.
Hmm.
But yeah, they inform your role.
Yeah, I could, I could, I could certainly see that. Now, because of the fact that this is on a mission-based design, do you plan on putting in a mission generator, much in the same way that stuff like Cyberpunk and Shadowrun have, as a conceit for GMs?
Absolutely. The only reason I haven't done one yet is because, like a lot of stuff in the GM's guide, I really want it to be at a pretty huge scale, and right now it's just not ready for, like it's not ready to be seen publicly. I don't think it'd be very polished.
Hmm.
But ideally, it's like, yeah, everywhere you go has its own table, maybe like every card on a deck of cards, or like a 2d10 roll or something, where there's a bunch of different missions that are specific to that area, probably like based on the sects or something.
Oh yeah.
That's a big goal because I want there to be I want the game to be complete enough since it is like a setting game, which I haven't really done in a while. That you can kind of go in without any prep and just like kind of roll up on a bunch of tables a pretty much complete campaign. And
Hmm.
that's definitely one of the things I need to do to meet that goal.
Oh yeah. And in that same vein, uh, when when it comes to doing missions, and this is the reason I brought up Shadowrun and Cyberpunk. Not every job, every gig is going to tie into combat. In several cases, combat is the worst case scenario. In
Hmm.
other cases, combat is going to happen. Like if you're in like Cyberpunk, if you're dealing with certain gangs, um, odds are it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when it comes to whether or not combat's going to break out. Whereas with other factions, that is the last thing you want because you are completely outgunned and outmatched in every form. And if you do start a fight, you're probably going to be coming back in pieces.
For sure, for sure.
Uh, and I do get the sense that that kind of thing is going to be present here, where there are multiple types of jobs that you'll be tasked with doing.
Yeah, it leans a bit more towards combat just because when you have the like cool cyborg robot people who are working for you,
Mm-hmm.
I think there is you are encouraged a little bit as a player to be like, yeah, well, we can kind of just send them in because these people we're deploying are kind of disposable, and on top of that, are going to be like way stronger than the average like human who might be at these job sites.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm looking at it a lot like Cyberpunk 2020, if you played or read any of that,
Oh, oh yeah.
where yeah, where you get like a lot of fun toys to do combat with, right? Like there's books and books and books full of guns for Cyberpunk 2020,
Hmm.
that they obviously want you to try using, and the rules for using guns are like very fun and they are very enticing. But once like a gunfight starts, I want you to be kind of like in awe at the violence. Like shit is going to go so bad so quickly, and it's not something you can really enter into very often. It's not like I definitely don't want to push it so far that it's like a tactics game or anything. More so sort of like violence is expected and a very useful way to solve problems because you have these crazy cyborg like super soldiers that are
Mm-hmm.
going into these missions, but also like super volatile, and you have to like consider before you go in if that's something you want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Now, with that in mind, uh, when it comes to advancement, is that something that's mainly on the human side, or are there ways for dolls to advance their capacities?
It's kind of both. In terms of traditional advancement, like yeah, that is mostly on the human side. Like your handlers have a career that they can progress and like get more money, get more resources, and get more stuff in the company as
Mm-hmm.
you go through the game. And there's that sort of progression element which I really enjoy. I like leveling up characters. I think it's very fun.
Mm-hmm.
But dolls are a bit more static. There are some, especially like the lower tier ones, where if you like sort of do the recruitment, if you like pull on the gotcha and you get like duplicates, you can get a little bit of a power up. But it's mostly going to be kind of optimizing your like pool of characters, where you're going to be getting like dolls that are more and more specialized and powerful in their role with like better and better items, and maybe you're sort of like funding them by picking up more and more items from like catalogs and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
using your own progression to buff them up quite a bit.
Yeah.
um and stuff like that of like optimizing out that pool. But the individual characters themselves don't really get much, I don't think. It's more so about what they do in relation to you and how they can like get your work done. They're sort of, I guess it's like they are a part of your progression. They are not really progressing it
Mm-hmm.
themselves.
Yeah, which I can see that, since players are not just the handlers, but the combination of handler and the dolls that they can bring to bear.
Dolls are a bit too complicated for me just to call them an item, but
Mm-hmm.
they're almost just an item. They are something that you are collecting for your character and like your for the resources as the group.
Mm-hmm. Which I can certainly get. Um, and with with that kind of thing in mind, since you mentioned polls, is it a case where when someone's trying to obtain dolls, would it be a card draw?
Yeah, exactly. Um, you can use like the currency you build up in game over the course of the sessions to build up. You have a bunch of like slots, and the number of slots you have it expands as you like increase your career rank and you get more sort of permissions
Mm-hmm.
from the company. And throughout the game, you can fill those slots or sort of draw into the what's the word I used? The bench,
Mm-hmm.
more and more dolls by drawing cards from the deck and getting like a rarity off of that, where like drawing face cards gets you the most rare options, then like different groups of numbered cards like
Mm-hmm.
ace 2 and 3 all correspond to the same like sort of low rarity doll, and sort of separated by suits and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I did see that each each suit of dolls, for lack of a better term, is tied to one of the four sects that isn't central. Um,
Yes.
one other thing I'm curious about is in those particular suits, is there any recurring theme that emerges? Bet-
Yeah, a bit, yeah. There's I think it's more like, you know, like Magic the Gathering. Um
yeah. You're where
If you
there's.
consider each of the suits like a set, right? Uh, they all come. It comes with like smaller subgroups within, where I've sort of set up, for example, in like the Spades suit.
Mhm.
That is where the dolls from North comes from. So they're all sort of sharing the themes of like there are these sort of like prissy sort of mountain getaways. So there's a lot of like butlers and people who are like on the mountains and like lots of like rich people and like the servants of rich people in that sort of pool of dolls, as well as separately also in the same sect this theme around like space exploration and
Mhm.
like in the mountains there's like a base where like they set up all of these like there's all of these different labs where they're working on like spaceships and stuff. So there's
Mhm.
also some like high ranking engineer type people and people who are like training to be astronauts and stuff like that. So yeah, they all share like a set of two or three themes that are shared within that sect, but it's typically there's not going to be one thing unifying all of them other than like they're from that place. That place is going to have a few sets of like smaller themes that they share.
Yep. And when it co- when it comes to when it comes to advancement, I did see that one of the higher ranks of benefits of advancement is getting a whole office. Uh,
Hmm.
so I'm curious if you plan on doing some sort of, for lack of a better term, base building within the
Yeah.
setup. Well, base is not the best word. Think more like a safe house.
Yeah. It's not a huge focus because like I played Blaze in the Dark recently,
Hmm.
and I know in Blaze of the Dark they have a very big focus on like you're all sort of part of the same crew and you're trying to come up from nothing and you're trying to build up this like this base, and it's very important of like the progression of that.
Hmm.
And there's like a bit of that element of like you are building things up as you go, but I think it is, very much like the name, more so like you are setting up decorations or like signs of prestige, like trophies and stuff, where you start off the game with like a place to stay, but it's implied that you're essentially in poverty. The dollhouse is like, you get paid well. You have like these sort of weird jobs and you get paid like thousands per job, but you're also kind of living paycheck to paycheck in the sense that you don't get a lot of jobs and you're always like anxious with what's coming next.
Hmm.
So a lot of the progression is sort of trying to satisfy you doing like these sort of dubious, very like most of the time like morally pretty questionable things by rewarding you with like, okay, yeah, you just like killed a child or whatever, but now you have enough money to buy a television set for yourself that you can put in your shitty apartment.
Hmm.
And then like once you start running out of room in that shitty apartment, maybe you can get like a condo or something. So you're supposed to care a lot about the areas you live in and like those sort of the what it's like to return home after the jobs with like what clothes are you bringing, what clothes are you bringing to work, what is your furniture around the house, what kind of house are you living in, do you have offices you can visit between jobs, do you have like secretaries who are going to help you when you once you get into the job, and like how cushy can you make your life as you progress throughout the game.
Hmm. Oh yeah, and one of the th- one of the things I find a bit curious is the nat- the nature of crossfires, where you're not going full tactical like you did with Dawn, but
No, no, yeah.
there is a degree of tactics that I think is present here. Uh,
Hmm.
primarily built around your choice of equipment and and the abilities that the dolls have, which is why I said it's more about the combined kit rather than individual components.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a lot of. I really do want to prioritize preparation. There's a thing in there for with rules for like initiating a gunfight in a sort of like westerny sense of what do you do before you get in there, like what's your plan.
Hmm.
And like you said, yeah, there's a lot of focus on the gear you bring in and what your dolls can do and how you prepare beforehand. That sort of is a lot of justifying for combat, like the rules for justifying why you'd win or lose a combat, but not really worrying about the tactics from like turn to turn elements as much. It's
Hmm.
a lot of focus is taken away from that compared to my tactical RPG stuff I've been doing.
Yeah. And given that there's a variety of options for kit when it comes to the dulls, I'm curious how easy or difficult it's been to keep track of them because not all of them can be used as freely as other abilities, obviously.
It's definitely like takes a lot, I think, because the way I've been putting it recently is that by removing the mental load of creating like an in-depth tactical character and worrying about in-depth tactical combat like turn by turn, I have not made the game easier, but just moved the concentration to something else. And in this case, it is like managing your inventory because all of your items are like pretty complex. You have like special little tags on each of them and the tags different abilities and
Hmm.
like the your abilities on your character also interact with your items, and items interact with that and everything and everything and everything. And it's very much like again that element of preparation. You are meant to think a lot about what you are bringing into missions pretty in depth
Hmm.
and put a lot of consideration into especially like what you're buying between missions and the kind of things that you're missing.
Hmm.
uh and it's something that I think I expect people to like forget details of from time to time, but that is sort of the nerdy element that comes with like TTRPG is like that's the thing that I want people to be focusing on and making decisions about for sure.
Yeah, which I could certainly see, and I especially see the playbook design with how you have the dulls set up, in the sense that each of them is a individual kit in that
Mhm.
regard. Uh, with that combination of abilities, locked abilities, and heirlooms. But
Hmm.
although because of how it's set up, it also avoids one of the big problems that that kind of kit design can have, which is when certain character archetypes might fall in between the cracks when it comes to that. In certain settings, this isn't as much of a thing in some of the more standard Powered by the Apocalypse settings, but I remember covering worldwide wrestling, which is taking that concept and applying it to wrestling, and the fact that you have to that I had to choose between the technician playbook or the high flyer playbook for a character I was using as an experiment for that is a notable flaw with that approach, but that doesn't have as much room to happen here, from what I'm seeing.
Yeah. I feel like when you are making your sort of class designs, like playbook designs for games, you have to very intentionally choose like, is this an OC making game or is this like a sort of a game where you are forced into a role?
Hmm.
And uh I think I'm thinking about that a lot recently because like my last game that I like finished up is Dawn was so much like you have a billion different moves from a billion different groups, and this is like a customizable like OC powers to the nth degree, and you kind of make whatever you want.
Hmm.
And I want to sort of constrain that a bit here because though that's really nice for being able to like make your own characters and have that level of expression in your design, as like for the players, it does often take away from what it means to be like a member of this world, and what your character is sort of forced to be by like what the setting is. And I guess I'm surprised to hear that like Worldwide Wrestling was more so like very prescriptive in what it was, because
It's
I don't know, it just seems like that would be a much more high fantasy sort of make your own OC thing, but maybe they're trying to be like way more intentional with it. I don't know.
well, it was one of those cases where the room was not read properly, in my opinion. Uh,
Mm,
there was a fundamental misunderstanding of what people are asking for when it comes to the idea of a wrestling TTRPG. Uh, and yes, there are plenty of wrestlers who are dedicated high flyers or dedicated technicians, but unfortunately, there's just as many who are hybrids, who
yeah.
dip a little bit into, and that's something that has naturally happened more and more as you have people going all over the place for different promotions and picking things up and learning from other people and whatnot. Um, so you end up with a lot of a lot of hybrids, uh, guys who may have done a bit of have a bit of brawling in their style, a bit of lucha, a bit of technician, uh, and even more so with the rise of MMA over the last 20 years. And
Mm-hmm.
furthermore, a lot of people who are going to be coming at it probably have played some of the wrestling video games where full character customization and even moveset customization has been standard for decades.
That's true, yeah. Especially thinking of the video games, you're right, it's like very much about what is the dream of like making your own wrestler.
And not just making your own custom appearance, but there's been more and more emphasis on making custom movesets, even some allowing some animation edits. Um, and then you've got stuff like Fire Pro Wrestling Returns, which just and its sequel World, which just lets you customize everything, including the refs. that was and that kind of thing is a major selling
Hmm.
point for that game. And am I saying that somebody has to copy that kind of thing one for one? No, but it is something to be aware of. It is the elephant in the room that's broken into my house and crashed on my couch.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. And it's something that's going to get brought up by anybody who's a fan of wrestling in general. Uh, Wild World it there were now that's not to say Wild World was a complete wash. There were um, a lot of narrative elements that were very well written, but it was one of those cases where strictly adhering to the playbook design probably wasn't the best call. And I remember, are you familiar with Cult?
I don't think I am. No.
Um, Cult, which is a interesting game that's been around over the years. When they did Divinity Lost, um, which used PBTA, they got into a bit of trouble with hardcore PBTA fans for the fact that it wasn't really doing that strict playbook setup per se.
Mm-hmm.
But I would argue that because of the kind of setting that Cult is, a very Gnostic horror kind of approach, doing that playbook approach would create more problems than it would solve.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, I kind of get it from their system in the sense of like, I think there is a level of people overusing Carbide Apocalypse as like a tag for their games to get clicks. but it is also like kind of whatever. I feel like the strict playbook design is something that only works for very specific kinds of games, and you can still take a lot of the other sort of
Yeah.
powered by the apocalypse like rulings and stuff,
Hmm.
and make something very different with it because of how like genericized those rules people take from uh that
Yeah.
like set of systems,
I'd say
how like how much
it.
they are.
I'd say it's more of a reflection of something I've called the biggest cope in the tabletop space, which is this idea that one system can run anything
Mm.
if you homebrew it enough. Uh, it is a case of something that is, in the strictest, most pedantic sense, technically true, but also misleading. Because at some point, you end up house ruling something to the point where you're not house ruling anymore. You're designing a whole game, which nothing wrong with that, but but at that point, it's not house ruling anymore. Uh,
Hmm.
like, is it really a house rule when when you've changed like 80% of the of the rules in the book? Uh, that ship of Theseus kind of thing. And every game is going to have certain things that it's good at and certain things that it's not. Even games that claim to be freeform that's going to have its own price to pay.
Yeah, really, it is like everything you add detail with.
Hmm.
Anything you add into a game is going to be a trade-off one way or another.
Hmm.
Like with like the reality of just the more rules you add, the more you are pushing something away from your game.
Yeah, and I don't want to give off the impression of, oh, adding more rules is bad or something like that. I'm certainly not one of those
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
guys who reads rule simplicity one-handed, if you catch my drift. But
Hmm.
it is more about understanding specificity. Um, this is something I've been seeing a lot when I've through studying Japanese tabletop. Uh, a game like Picaresque Roman, which is somewhat of a parallel in certain tones to Dollhouse, is built for its particular world and is not interested in doing anything else. Could you take that and do the Ryoga Gotoku games? I mean, possibly, but you're gonna have to put in the work. Uh,
Hmm.
we were talking about Sword World before we went live, and Sword World is not a setting agnostic game. It has its particular world. Uh, in 1.0, that was for Celia. In 2.0, that's Raxia. And so much of what it's built around is focused on that. And to bring this back to Dollhouse, when I was going through the document that you had sent me, one of the things that immediately sprung to mind is the do's and don'ts, which is which is basically a primer of saying what this game is designed to do and what it is not.
Yeah, it's that's something that showed up in Dawn initially.
Hmm.
I remember Dawn got very popular. Like I would argue that like it could possibly like still end up more popular, than Dollhouse just because of how much it popped off. And even though like all my games have kind of gone more and more popular as time has gone on, Dawn was big for me. So when I was developing that, there was a lot of people who came in and had to like ask questions about what the game was doing versus not doing, or like made presumptions with the things the game could do that it could not, and things like that. Where eventually I did end up like in the final version, putting in a lot more just explicit writing in the text from me about what the game is meant to do, and I think it's one of my favorite things that I included in there. And from now, I'm not thinking I'm gonna stop. Yeah, it's in Dollhouse 2. Just a list of points of things you should and should not do in the game, and I think it's a very useful sort of starter on if you think you're going to be interested in it.
Yeah. And I know some may cry foul at at that kind of thing of, oh, you should be able to do what you want in an RPG. But
They're lying.
again,
They're lying.
I don't think anyone's saying that is completely honest because of how schizophrenic that particular thing can get. Uh, I've talked about this in the past of certain games that claim that they are trying to be setting agnostic, but you look at the practicality of how they work and they're clearly not, or vice
Mm.
versa. And for me, the analogy that comes to mind is shit or get off the pot.
It's like it's something I'm more upset with by like designers than players a lot of the time,
Mhm.
because I think as a player, like there's a certain level of with the right group, like it doesn't really matter what you're playing that much. You can have a pretty good time.
Mhm.
But like designers should not be designing around that group. Designers should be designing around like people who don't really like get along perfectly, or like need a level of prompting to get going,
From what I see
because
as
that
it
is
is,
like how you're going to help the most people.
mhm. From what I see as a designer, you have no way of knowing what table is going to be playing your game.
Exactly. So it's like, why would you like make a game that is meant for like people who will be able to like set up a full game with like the full setting and full like sort of rulings for what they want to do on their own, which is a very small group of people, when you have the ability to like bring together people who may struggle with like one or more of those elements
Hmm.
and sort of get that work done for them, be more specific, give them like a more informed experience.
Yeah,
Especially because there are a lot of games out there that will be perfect for those people who like are willing to do that work themselves and sort of just need the most barest of sort of outlines for it.
yeah. Um, I actually ended up covering that when I was talking about Marvel Multiverse, where I
Hmm.
thought I thought a I thought it made a mistake in assuming people would be coming at it as if they were reading the current iteration of the comics.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the art was very much drawn from where the comic book was at that time, at the time that it came out, and I didn't think that was the right call because if you're dealing with, say, Marvel, you're gonna be dealing with people coming at it from different angles. Some people may be more attached to the John Byrne or Chris Claremont eras of the comics. Uh,
Hmm.
John Byrne being the guy who helped define the X Men. Uh, some people may be coming at it from the MCU. Some people may be coming at it through the '90s cartoons during the Toy Biz era. Some people may be coming at it through the um, video games. You don't have to write for all of those entries, but it's best to have a kind of middle ground so you don't run into that disconnect. 'Cause I remember when I shared my copy of that with a friend, he was like, "Why is Professor X walking?" Which doesn't sound like that big of a deal if somebody's read through the comics at the time. But if somebody hadn't seen anything X-Men related since the mid 2000s, that's gonna throw them off.
Hmm. It's yeah. I think it's. I can imagine that would be a hard decision to make, especially with like the corporate breathing down your neck as someone who's working on it, because like Marvel did pop off so much recently, you'd expect to like have that level of investment of people into the modern comics, but honestly, it's like
For
I
as
feel
much
like
as
there
it's
aren't
popped
actually
off, the
that
comics
many
have not
people.
sold as well as people think. Like I would get
Exactly,
the
right?
I would get the numbers
So
on a monthly basis. If they were popping off that much, you wouldn't see new series being launched and then getting canceled after 6 weeks.
And so I feel like there is going to be quite a few people who are coming in with only the sort of like basic, or not basic knowledge, but like knowledge of what it was like when the comics were popping up the most, like before the movies and stuff.
Hmm.
When that was like the only source of Marvel stuff other than like I guess like video games and TV shows, but
Which
when that
the
was the main sort of source of Marvel content.
the funny thing is, I've seen that happen. Like with previous attempts, where the core book would be kind of a baseline, and if they wanted to lean into something more specific, that was reserved for a supplement.
Hmm.
Uh, like the Marvel Heroic, which was a Margaret Weiss project, uh, had a neutral tact when it came to the core rules, and one of the first expansions was solely focused around where characters were at during Civil War.
Yeah.
Uh, so it can be done.
It definitely can be. And in fact, it's probably easier to do because like if you are calling yourself the like de facto modern like sort of setting
Hmm.
for like something like Marvel that is continually updating like as time goes on over and over and over, it means you are going to be outdated pretty quickly. Where if you sort of date yourself in a period of the comics, then you're going to kind of forever be rooted in that, even if like no matter how far the present moves on from that point, you've already stated that that is where you are, rather than being the or attempting to be as present as possible, which is something that you can't really keep up with.
Yeah, there was a project called Evolved, um, that was a fork of Dungeon Crawl Classics, but it wasn't trying to be every superhero thing in general. It was trying to specifically emulate the more sci-fi aspects of 90s X-Men. Um,
Hmm.
especially things like Genosha, the Sentinels, all of that kind of stuff. Uh, and I look at Dollhouse and I see a similar level of specificity. It is trying to hack together Dollhouse to do something in a whole other genre would be akin to trying to run F1 cars on a NASCAR track, which
For sure.
which I will note has been tried. Um, it never worked. It's been tried at least 3 times in the last 40 years, and it always failed.
Yeah, it's I don't know how like aggressive I want to be like that because there's a level of like
Mhm.
pretension that's like you have to do it my way no matter what, and
Oh,
like
that
on a certain level I do
obviously not go that
respect
far,
like
but
you know
but
exactly right
more.
or not saying that you were, but I think like even my writing in there currently is like has a little bit of that pretension of like maybe I'm going too intense with it, but I mean it is true where I really wouldn't recommend anyone, even if you are like just having fun with it, tries to alter the setting too much because yeah, like it's so specific. Everything in there is like referring to a very specific place in the setting and like a
Yeah,
concept in the setting. And like maybe you could do a custom hack if you really, really, really worked really hard, but it just seems
the
so. Like, it seems like a bad idea.
Um, putting myself in the spotlight for that kind of thing. Oh, there there have been a few people who've requested, some a bit more strongly than request, I will say, that I do a grid combat system. They do
Hmm.
traditional grid combat. Uh, I have I have gone into detail why I didn't do that for the core book itself, but the attitude that I have stated is I do encourage homebrew, so it's a matter of I'm not going to stop you from doing it, but I'm also not going to
Hmm.
help you. It's like if you want to build that whole thing, you're on your own. You're not getting any help from me. And it's been tried maybe 3 times over the last year, where somebody attempts it, works on it for maybe 3 weeks, and then drops it. I'd imagine because they realize how much stuff they actually have to work on, and the and the whole eyes bigger than your stomach comes up.
Hmm.
But with
I'm
that,
also
good.
don't put me on. Don't write this down. Don't quote me on this. But I also am a big fan of people doing things that are bad ideas because their muse spoke to them. That's that's something I encourage. I think people should do things that are fruitless and
Yeah.
result in nothing because that I think that helps being creative in a lot of ways. But only as long as you are willing to accept that it is fruitless and may not lead to anything.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you've probably seen that adage. We do this not because it is easy, but because we thought it was.
Can't say I have, but it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Uh, I remember seeing Inferno Plus say go do a project that was built on the idea of um we need to put Blood Gulch in Dark Souls. We figured, oh, it'd just be a relatively easy thing to do. That was his thought at first. He was quickly corrected on on that particular line of thinking. Uh, or even something as simple as trying to do tribe style sliding physics in Halo, specifically in Halo 2, was a nightmare to work with. Uh, but yeah, sometime, as I said before, eyes bigger than your stomach. But now the current preview document uh, is about 164 pages. 162 if you exclude the if you exclude the credits in the back cover. Um, what are you shooting for as far as a total page count?
I think it's stated somewhere on the Kickstarter page, but it is somewhere around like I think 230, 250
Mm-hmm.
because I think it could go further than that with what I want to do for the GM stuff. Like I said before, I really want it to be so in depth that you could just like roll up a campaign if you wanted to. I also want to keep it information dense, and I don't want to waste any space. So I'm sort of setting myself a hard limit of I think 250. It'll probably land around closer to 230.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I could most certainly see that. And with that said, I do want to congratulate you on how well the thing's done once again, and a
Thank you
sincere
very much.
thanks for making the way all the way to my monastery to enjoy the madness that happens here.
It was a grueling trip up the mountains, but I had a good time. It was really.
And of course, anytime you see fit to return, whether it's for more of Dawn or for Dollhouse or just to um, shit post about how the RNG gods hate all of us,
Mhm.
The door is always open. As I often say around here, drinking is not mandatory, but it is encouraged. And, of course, a sincere thanks goes out to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come onto the show and enjoy the madness. And there'll be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here, on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.